Hi, everyone. Blake here from The Lonely Wrist. And this is the first time I'm sitting here on camera like this. And honestly, it's because this might be one of the most important videos that I make. Today, I want to talk about what it really means to own a watch and not just wear one. Long term ownership requires care, maintenance, patience, and ultimately commitment. And this video has taken me nearly 3 years to complete. Why? Because over those last 3 years, I intentionally bought multiple watches with the goal of restoring them through their respective brands. Watches from names that we all love: Rolex, Omega, IWC, Zenith, Cartier, Bulgari, just to name a few. But I think my experiment has finally come to an end, and I couldn't think of any other way to package this video. But here is my conclusion. Caring for watches just kind of sucks. And it sucks across almost every brand. The common trends were really impossible to ignore: long service times, poor communication, inconsistent service quality, and extremely high costs. We're often sold this sort of romantic idea of generational ownership, and that these watches are meant to be passed down and cared for forever. But in reality, for most brands, that idea isn't practical. Take Rolex, for example. Rolex outright refused to service one of my watches with no explanation at all. This watch was a Datejust 1601, which might be one of the more popular Datejusts out there. There's really no excuse for that. Bulgari, frankly, doesn't seem to know how to service a watch or watches at all. After 10 months in service, the chronograph hand literally fell off in the store and they told me the watch had to go back to Switzerland. I eventually refused and they decided to send the watch to an outside watchmaker on contract. And only then was the repair done correctly. IWC's customer service left a lot to be desired. I was sort of bounced from employee to employee, including a promise that they would buy my watch with a measly and insulting offer. So that never happened. Cartier actually did a solid job overall and pretty quickly, but the watch had to go back a second time to be corrected. This was a modern piece, so you would expect an easier watch to service. Omega was kind of a mixed experience, and I sent 3 watches out. One modern piece was a warranty repair and took about 3 months. 2 vintage pieces took between 11 months and 13 months, with virtually no communication at all. And even the boutiques had no visibility into timelines and eventually just told me they'll call me when it comes back. That being said, the actual service performed by Omega was excellent, and I do appreciate that they return the replaced components. Zenith, one of my favorite brands, takes a more conservation first approach. I wouldn't call what they did even a restoration, but that really made me stop and think, who is this really for? And who sends vintage watches back for a restoration? The answer is sentimental collectors, people with emotional connections to their watches. And honestly, none of these projects were that for me. They were watches that I loved the idea of owning and not watches tied to memories. And that brings me to the entire point of this video. Before buying a watch, you need to think about ownership the same way that we think about cars. Some cars are beautiful, exciting, but deeply flawed. And we accept that before we buy them. We know they're going to be hard to maintain, expensive to service, and inconvenient to own. And watches deserve that same perspective. So, I am curious to hear from you. Do you agree? Let me know. Have you had a terrible service experience? And has that changed how the way you feel about owning that watch? Let me know in the comments below, and I will see you guys on the next one.